more of the team, Charlie. Well?
Now, here he is, a man of God, living in a world of Disney.
Ow, Charlie!
CharLee Simons.
Charlie bit me.
Hello, my friend. Welcome to Do Not Talk. Talk about two things you're never supposed to talk about: religion and politics. Politics and religion. One decides what life is going to be like here on earth. The other one decides what it's going to be like when we leave it. Kind of makes it vitally important. Should have never stopped talking about it as far as I'm concerned, especially in the churches. My guest is someone I admire greatly, and I'm glad to be able to have him back on the show, Dr. Douglas Frank. I not only admire him, but I'm very happy to call him a friend. He's the real deal, Holyfield. I've found nothing dishonest in him or about him. Nobody's perfect, of course, but I'll tell you what, he's a man of integrity, great integrity. And he is coming back to my area in Northern California. He's going to be in Placer County in a little old town called Antelope at the Point Church this coming Saturday at 6:30. Here he is now for your dining and dancing pleasure. Hello, Dr. Frank.
Good to see you, Charlie. Good to be with you again. I'm looking forward to seeing you Saturday.
Yes, as am I, and I want to get as many people there as possible. This is something I've been talking about since the beginning of this show 3 years ago, and that is the responsibility of my fellow believers and followers of Christ Jesus actually taking their responsibility for voting seriously. We were blessed with a nation unlike any, and a form of government and a constitutional republic unlike any in the history of the world. Never has one person had a voice and a say in who's going to be calling the shots for us.
We have
Nobody.
Financial independence, we have religious independence, we have political independence, all coming together in one nexus that's never happened before in the history of the world. I agree. And the sad thing about it is that we, the people, have gone to sleep for the last several decades, and we've given up our voice. I always tell people, this is a republic. This is not a democracy. We select people to represent our voices. The problem is we don't select them anymore. We've given away that function. We used to run our own elections. Now other people are running them. So we have to re-engage that. As a Christian myself, brother, I have been, I'm dismayed, as many of my Christian brothers and sisters are, how the ethics and the morals of our culture has been in decline, and our churches are silent. We got to fix that.
I know it's been a little weird, actually.
Yes.
As my friend Mike Netter says, we're not battling against the Democrats. We're battling against an apathetic Republican Party.
Whoa. And you brought up the party, not me. I'm telling you, after the 2024 election, the party's out there spinning the message. And I got to tell you, the Republicans did not help us in this election. In fact, the strategies that they were promoting across the country failed. And so in my presentation, I'm going to be focusing on our responsibility as Christians.
You froze up. Dag nabbit. Let's give it a second, see if you come back. If you can still hear me, Doctor, you might want to back out and come back on. I'll bring you back on again. We'll finish this discussion, but he's at a hotel somewhere, and relying on hotel Wi-Fi is not always the most dependable, especially if you consider the possibility that the enemy doesn't want him getting this message out to our fellow believers. So you might want to back out, and if you can still hear me, and come back on again. There we go. There he is.
Yeah, brother, I'm sorry about that, brother. I'm in a hotel room, and the internet is not as reliable.
I know. I was just explaining that.
Anyway, so what I was saying was that the Republican Party is spreading the message that their strategy worked. I'm going to show you data that their strategy of registering voters and chasing ballots and all that sort of stuff, that actually failed. And I'll be showing you the data. I like saying to people that the Republicans that Trump didn't win the election. The Democrats lost it. So, and I'll show you that evidence. And I feel like God has given us a temporary reprieve here. Can you imagine what the country would be like right now? Compare Trump to Kamala. Holy mackerel, we would be a completely different country. And we've been given this short 2-year reprieve where I think we can make a lot of difference. But Christians have to engage, and we have to engage now. Jesus.
You froze up again. Dr. Frank, if you have your phone handy and you have good cell signal, you might want to, it'll be a completely different shot, but you might want to log out and come back on through your phone. See if that makes a difference. Just bypass the Wi-Fi altogether. Or if you have hotspot on your phone, you can connect that up. But in the meantime, I'm going to take you out of the mix. Yeah.
About that, brother. Sorry about that. I think I should have just used my own hotspot on my phone. It'd probably be better than this.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying. And we can do that. I'll be glad to wait so we don't keep getting cut off right at very crucial moments.
It seems like Satan's right there going, gotcha, gotcha, gotcha.
I know, exactly. That's what I said too. I think that the enemy doesn't want this information getting out, because for God's people to actually start engaging and taking responsibility for the privilege of being able to have a say. I'm gonna put, there you go. Yeah. Hopefully he'll do the hotspot thing and come back on. There's a constitutional attorney who I also greatly admire. Her name is Chris Ann Hall. And she threw out these statistics that were just stunning to me, that a third of the state of California, claim to be evangelical Christians, Bible-believing Christians. A third. Now, I don't see a lot of evidence of that in the voting records of my fellow Christians, but I'll take her word for it. A third claim to be Christian, yet only about 40% are even registered to vote. And when it comes to midterm and primary elections, it's in the teens. It's dismal. We don't engage. And just we fellow followers of Christ Jesus, if we took that responsibility seriously of voting, we could turn this state around in an election or two. And Dr. Douglas Frank is saying we have a 2-year window to get this done. 2 years. And that's because we have the midterm elections coming up in 26. So actually less than 2 years, isn't it? Dr. Douglas Frank is going around speaking at churches, and he's going to be at the North Point Church in Antelope this coming Saturday. And I'll give you that address right now. 8155 Watt Avenue. That's WATT for anyone that doesn't know the area. 8155 Watt Avenue, Antelope. And the Point Church, Point with an E on the end, is hosting Dr. Douglas Frank. It starts at 6:30. It is free. It is free. They don't charge to come in for this event. They will be asking for donations, though, for Dr. Frank. He finances these all by himself. He does not charge to come and speak at groups and churches. And I know that he is, it's his mission. This is his mission, to get this word out and to let people know and sound the alarm, really is what it is. We cannot continue to be apathetic anymore and just sit back and go, oh, well, someone else will take care of it. And please stop saying my vote doesn't count, because trust me, when you don't vote, it counts. It counts against us. It counts against God's people. We have an administration, people, very terrible people running the show who are against everything that God and God's people stand for. Everything. life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? No, it's all about take life. I'm talking about the unborn. It's all about taking away your liberty by having a very tyrannical style government where look at during the COVID shutdown. Never forget what your own politicians in the state of California did to us and are still trying to do to us. It's the pursuit of happiness, not when you're completely burdened by such exorbitant taxes and our dollar goes so little, doesn't go as far as it used to, that's for sure. And so much of that is just because businesses are going out of business. Businesses like McClintock Steakhouse down in the Arroyo Grande, that area, Central Coast of California, been around for decades. Just a heritage restaurant that everybody knew, everybody could see, and people love to go there. Closed just about a month ago. And it's because they just couldn't stay solvent anymore because of the state of California and the policies here and the way they are so anti-business, especially when it comes to families and middle class, the ones who actually own and operate so many local businesses like that. Get rid of them. We don't want them. We don't want them around because we learned to be self-sufficient. And we don't want the government taking care of us from cradle to grave, but yet that's what they do. And that's what they are going to do. It seems like they want the middle class to go away. They don't want any more of that here in California. It's going to be the haves and the have-nots, and the have-nots will be serving the haves. Sounds kind of biblical, doesn't it? So do we just sit back and let it happen? Oh, I'm just going to give it to the Lord. And geez, I sure hope things work out. Oh, well. Really? We're not gonna actually engage in that. We're not gonna actually try and stop that. Well, we're voting against God. I've heard Christians say that too. I don't want to vote against God. I've actually heard them say that. Trust me. By not voting, you're putting these horrible people in positions of power. Yes, you are, by not getting involved, not being engaged in what's happening, and actually trying to stop it. Just because it's going to happen, and we know it's going to, because I pray for that. God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven, just like Jesus told us to pray. However, we're also told to pray for peace, pray for a righteous government, an actual say in that. We can elect the people who are righteous and who are God's people, and we don't. How complicit are we? How responsible are we for what has happened to our state? I used to think it was all the Democrats' fault, and it's all politicians. You can only blame them for so long before you start looking at the people who are putting them in those positions of power. My own fellow Californians, who seem to be absolutely fine with letting everything fall apart as long as they continue getting their freebies. That's it. Doesn't matter what happens to the state. Doesn't matter what happens to the nation, as long as you continue to keep getting your freebies. How do you not see that that is turning us into almost a slave class, especially the middle class? It's not sustainable. And when California goes, so goes the rest of the nation. And financially, we're at last report, almost $80 billion in debt. Those numbers come from the government, so I don't trust them. I'm sure it's far, far worse. How do we survive that? How do we come back from that? How do we, I've got Dr. Frank back on. Let's get him back in. Were you able to do your hotspot thing?
Yeah, I'm hotspotting.
Okay, very, very good.
Sorry, it took me a minute there.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for coming back.
I
Thank
could
you
still hear you though, so I was hearing what you're saying, and we're right in sync, brother.
I know we are, but it's so much better when it comes from you because you're a lot smarter than I am.
Thank you.
Are you still working with Frank's speech, Mike Lindell? you still working with that crowd?
Yes, Mike and I are friends, and I have a great respect for him. I just spent 4 days with him in DC 3 weeks ago at the CPAC, and that was a big event for us because that was him announcing his new Lindell TV 2.0, he calls it. With our new president, we've got in the press room, they've made an announcement. They're going to allow other media people to be in there. And Mike has 3 full-time correspondents now that have press passes, and they're in there. So every time you see one of the president's press conferences happening, we've got people there live, broadcasting, commenting, interviewing the right people, because we can't rely on the mainstream media to do that properly for us.
I actually applied for that when they
Yes.
got the word out. We're looking for podcasters and
Yeah.
broadcasters and
Yes.
as they call us, alternative media now, invited into the press room and to be a part of that.
Yeah.
I was so excited and I applied, but I never heard back. I'm like, that guy's too little.
Sorry about that. But
All right.
while I was there,
It's amazing. It's never been done. That's definitely unprecedented, isn't it?
Yeah. But it is the future. I mean, here we are on a podcast. Okay, I mean, this is a new world that compared to what it used to be. So anyway, on the third day of CPAC, it was a Friday morning. Mike Lindell got to. I was working with him in his booth and whatnot and helping out. And he gave a copy of his book to everybody who attended. The What Are the Odds book, and he was signing them for everybody. So we were having a great time with all the people. But on Friday morning, he got to speak to the large assembly, and after that, he was whisked away to the White House, and he got to spend 90 minutes with President Trump in the White House. And the purpose of that meeting was for him to give the president a list of our requests, things that we are doing in the election integrity movement. And when Mike came out of that meeting, I saw him minutes afterward. He was just bouncing off the wall. He said the president said yes to everything. And so I don't know if you noticed, one of the things Mike requested was about Tina Peters, because she's in prison right now and it's not okay. And when Mike brought up Tina, and I know the president knows Tina. I've sat at Bedminster at his golf course, President Trump's golf course, sitting there with Tina and President and Mike at the table, at the dining room table, sitting there talking. The president knows her well and knows who she is. And so Mike brought up the fact that she was in jail and going to prison for 9 years, and Gold Star mom, a real patriot. We got forensic images because of her cooperation. President Trump looked over at a line of 6 attorneys in the room and he says, "Get her out." It was awesome. And so you'll notice that the following week, after CPAC, the Department of Justice announced an investigation into her case as a case of lawfare. And what's brilliant about it is the prosecuting attorney and the judge themselves said they're making an example out of her. So it's like, okay, well, I mean, it's like they gave us all the things we needed to declare a mistrial and get her out and whatnot. So I know that's taking place. So that was just one of the things. Another one of the things is we have a national strike team that's being set up right now for that. I've been in discussions about that. I don't know for sure I'm going to be on that team, but boy, would I love to be on that team. And we're going to go across the country and expose fraud. California is going to be one of my first targets, of course. I'm down here in Huntington Beach today. I'm in a hotel room here in Huntington Beach. Huntington Beach is an important place in California because the city officials have announced that they're going to run their own elections. And when the state heard about it, they're like, wait a minute, you can't do that. We're in charge of this. And so they just said, well, here's our charter. Here's our city charter. And it says right here in our city charter that we're entitled to run our own elections. So we're going to do it. And so that's a lawsuit that's going on right now. And I think I'm going to be helping them with that. I've already been coaching them, just like I was coaching Shasta County and San Joaquin County. I've been working throughout.
And Placer. You met with the registrar of voters, Ryan Ronco.
Yeah.
You said something earlier that before we went on the air, that you're amazed at how few of these county clerks, the ones running the elections in the counties, don't know how they're being duped and how they're being used.
Yeah. Here's an example. Let's say you have 100 people in your voter rolls right now. And next month you look at the clerks don't keep their own voter rolls anymore. I call them clerks. Forgive me. In California, I know you call them ROVs, Registrar of Voters. Every state's different, so I keep I get it confused. But the ROV doesn't keep his own copies of the rolls. He just logs into the state system to maintain the voter rolls. So let's say he logs in today and it says there's 100 people. And then next month he logs in to add or remove a couple people and it says there's 101. And then the next month he logs in and it says there's 102. In his mind, he's just thinking, okay, it's about the same, no big deal. But what's really happening is during that period of time, 10 people are being removed and 10 people are being added. We call that churn. He doesn't even realize the churn that's going on. And voters are being added who are not citizens. Voters are being added who are not even real residents anymore. A friend of mine in San Benito County calls them homing pigeons. People that have moved away a decade ago, they come home. And then suddenly they reappear in the voter rolls, and they didn't move back to town. We can look up their voting record in other states. So there's all this churning going on in the background that the ROVs don't even know it. So when I come to town and I show them their own data, their jaws fall open. They had no idea this is going on. And so my argument that I make to them is, as long as you're not in control of your own elections, all this fraud and illegal voting we see, you're not the one who's really responsible. You're not the one who did it, but you're accountable. The law says that you're accountable for the integrity of the election in your county, and you sign off on the election. So wait a minute, you're legally accountable for something that you're not in charge of? Who would want to be legally? I wouldn't want to be legally accountable for what CharLee Simons does. Okay. I mean, you're a nice guy and everything, but I want to be legally accountable for what I do. Well, yeah. As a county ROV, wouldn't you want to be legally accountable only for your own choices and your own decisions? Well, guess what? As it stands right now, we're going to come after you legally. We're going to hold you accountable for all this fraud and illegal voting that's happening. And you're going to say, not fair, not fair. I'm using the state system. And I'm going to say, exactly. So stop using the state system. Take back local control. And that's what all this, that's why I called it 7 steps, taking back local control of your elections. Take back control, because that's what you need to do. Otherwise, we're never going to have integrity in our elections again.
That is an elected position. And most people don't even pay attention. They don't know. And it's not like they even campaign hard for it, because they know it's pretty much a given. This is the same electorate that keeps putting people like Gavin Newsom into tremendous power. Governor Hairdo, as I affectionately call him. Look what's happening there. Anything with a D after its name, anything with who espouse the virtue signaling of the left that is so important to them. It's their religion. They worship the government.
Well said.
They seem to be unaware of what's happening with their own registrar of voters. And there are people being elected who really, it's been my experience, and those that I've come to know and know about, they don't care. They don't have much of a budget. They're making their nice big salary. They're getting the big government benefits. They keep getting elected to the same position over and over and over again. And it's all status quo to them. And maybe they even agree with it. They don't seem to care at all in a lot of these counties. And, we're not demanding better. We, the people, are not demanding better.
That's the real problem. And that's why this Talk Saturday, that's what this is about. The church has disengaged from this. And I was like, the church is one of the most organized, most conservative segments of our society, and they've disengaged. So I always like to challenge Christians. I'm a scientist, I'm a Christian, and I enjoy the discussions and debates, but I always like to say, what would Jesus do? And just imagine yourself, and that's an old thing, right? What would Jesus do? But imagine you walk up to Jesus and you say, in our state, we don't know the difference between a man and a woman. What would Jesus say to that? I mean, would he go, oh, I get it. Yeah, we have all these other possibilities. No, Jesus would never say that, okay? Or, oh, gee, in our state, we condone homosexuality. And Jesus would say, what? Or in our community, we encourage women to get abortions. Would Jesus say that? Okay, so all these things that we just turn the other eye to, all we care about is the gospel. Is the gospel all Jesus cared about? No, he went into the temple. He threw the tables over, and he got out the whips and chased them out of the temple. Okay. Did Jesus care about politics? Yes. Scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites, right? And oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem. Jesus was very engaged in politics. And, Peter and Paul, just read the book of Acts. As they're traveling around Paul and Silas, I meant to say, as they're traveling around on the missionary journeys, you remember they got thrown in jail every town they went into. Okay, this whole idea that we're not supposed to be engaged is just stupid. All of the examples we've been given, the perfect man example of Jesus Christ tells us how we're supposed to behave. All the early Christians show us what we were supposed to do. Our founding fathers of our country, the ministers, they call them the Black Robe Regiment. The Black Robe Regiment led the revolution. Our ministers were the commanding officers. Where are our commanding officers today? There's a wonderful story about this. When the Revolutionary War was starting, the British were on this, were ready to attack the colonists. And of course, in their traditional stuffy way, the commander of the British regiment came up and he said, surrender in the name of the king, before they're about to, assume they're going to slaughter us. And somebody one of the colonists screamed back. He said, "We have no king but Jesus." Okay. And then the first shot heard around the world took place. So Christians are supposed to be engaged. We were engaged. We're here today in a country that says in God we trust, because our founding fathers understood that we were here by providence and understood that God's hand was at work. Well, where is that today? And so you can tell I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm starting to sound like it's on Saturday. So I'm going to be talking about that stuff on Saturday. And I'll throw in a few fun things too, because I'm also a scientist and a Christian. And I always like talking about the relationship between science and Christianity, not merely just politics and Christianity. Like for example, I always like to talk about Jesus's miracles. And people are always, I like when I read the Bible with different glasses on sometimes, and sometimes I put my scientific glasses on. It's a lot of fun. And so I look at the miracles of Jesus as a scientist, and his first miracle was at the wedding at Cana. Remember when he made water into wine? And people always say, well, big deal, move on. That's a boring miracle. No, just wait, hold on just for a second. If you're going to make water, H2O, 2 hydrogen atoms, 1 oxygen atom, molecular weight 18 grams per mole. If you're going to convert that into ethanol, okay, because wine is essentially 12 or 14% ethanol, let's say, you got to get oxygen atoms converted into carbon atoms, because ethanol is C2H5OH. Okay, you got to get oxygen. Okay, and I do the calculation, and it works out. It's a nuclear reaction. Jesus, in that one little simple miracle, a minimum of 4 Hiroshima bombs worth of energy took place in that miracle. Okay, that is a serious miracle. And then people say, well, yeah, raising people from the dead, that's the big one. Piece of cake. Just get a little electricity, and you can raise somebody from the dead. Okay. So it's fun. It's fun to look
as we learned in Dr. Frankenstein.
Exactly. And so to me, I'll throw in a little bit of that too. So not just merely the relationship between science and faith, science and politics, but also a little science and faith stuff like that. Really, as Christians, this is our moment. This is in our country. If we don't stand now, we might as well just throw the whole thing away. This is as we mentioned earlier, it's a 2-year opportunity. And then I noticed you were smart. You figured it's really only a 1-year opportunity, because we have to have this figured out before the primaries. And the story we're being fed by the Republican Party is not correct. And I'll clear that up on Saturday too.
I just came from the California State Republican Convention. I was there. In fact, on Saturday, I was on the air for 12 and a half hours, just putting people after person on the show. That posts today, by the way, at rumble.com/DoNotTalk. You'll be able to watch the whole thing if you want. There's some vitally important information in there. But the Republican Party itself in the state of California has been infiltrated by those who want to see everything that we stand for and believe in dismantled and taken away from the party in California. I'm telling people now, boycott the GOP of California. Don't give them a dime. Don't give them a dime. They're horribly mismanaged, wasteful. Talk about electronic voting. Just Placer County is paying $1 million a year to stay on that Dominion machine debacle.
Yes.
$1 million a year, little old Placer County. That's what they pay to use Dominion. And it's because the state of California told them they had to. And you're under contract and you have to pay us because we are the ones who decided what you were going to use. Yeah. I'm sorry, what? And the GOP of California uses little electronic voting devices. It's about the size of a TV remote. And that's how we are voting. And at one point during the whole event on Sunday as the voting session, an error message popped up on the big screen and we all saw it. And some were able to take photos of it. So there is evidence of it that it said error. And at one point, 100 people out of the 1,300 or so that were there voting by proxy as well, which is horrible. 100 people suddenly went away. And one of the delegates noticed it and got on the mic and said, "What happened? How come suddenly there's 100 people left? And I just checked with the folks who if you leave the room, you got to turn your voting device back in." He goes, "No devices have been turned back in. What happened to those 100 people? Why are they suddenly gone? Who are they?"
Like how they voted, I guess.
This chair that is now gone, thank God, but the one who replaced her is just as bad, if not worse. The chair gavelled him out. "You're out of order," turned off the microphone of several people who were going, "What's going on here with this little voting device? We're supposed to be setting the example, Dr. Frank, as the Republican Party of free and fair elections. And we've gotten right on board with the whole electronic thing." The national GOP doesn't do that, but we in California, we are using those at a cost, by the way, of $75,000 per convention.
Wow. So you guys are duped too. I just came from Oregon, and several of the counties there, the citizens have taken back control of the GOP in their counties, and that's and it's so refreshing.
That's happening here, but the state party's taken delegates away from these county committees, these central committees. They're taking their delegates away. It's been crazy. I've been trying to get the word out all day Saturday. That's what we kept talking about over and over and over again, that this is happening, and people are, it's like, well, we won, Trump won, so everything's going to be okay.
No.
Well, you mentioned Tina Peters earlier. There's a reason why President Trump can't just go pardon her right now, get her out of there, because it's the state. She was prosecuted through the state.
That's right. And
he can't just go in and change that.
Right. But what I've learned a lot in the last 4 years. I'm a physicist, I'm a scientist. And when I started this work, I assumed that if you have evidence and a good argument that you should win. And I had to learn that politics doesn't work that way. And one of the things, perfect example of this is that same day that President Trump, that Mr. Lindell at CPAC spoke to President Trump, that same day, the president spoke to the governors of the country, remember? And he had signed the executive orders saying that you couldn't have men and women's sports. And the governor from Maine, the woman there, she said, "Oh, we're going to still have men and women's sports in our state." And President Trump pointed his finger and he said, "Yeah, okay, I'm going to have a look at those federal grants that your state gets, and we're going to take care of that." And just a day or two ago, I noticed that I think it's a university in Pennsylvania is going to lose their federal grants. A university is going to lose it because Trump, they're in violation of his executive order. So the way the real world works is, I think, like I mentioned before, the Department of Justice is looking into the Tina Peters situation. And I think they're going to make a recommendation to the president, and he's going to say, "That's a mistrial. You guys need to get her out right away." And if they say, "No, we're not going to do that," he's going to say, "Well, let's just have a look at those list of federal grants here that I can cancel for you." And in other words, he's got a big stick, and he's not afraid to use it. And that's been pretty fun. We were talking about the party a minute ago. I think that is another. I mean, it's not just voting. As citizens, we are supposed to be being the government. America is an experiment in self-government. You mentioned Chris Ann Hall. Gosh, I love that lady. She's awesome. She says we have to resume our sovereign duties. We're the sovereigns. I did an event with her recently, and every time I'm with that lady, I learn stuff, and I have great admiration for her.
She's amazing.
But I was up in this county up in Oregon, and I was giving an event. It was in Linn County, Linn, Linn County, and I spoke at their local group, and the lady took me by the hand and walked me into the back of the facility, and they have what they call their war room, and the walls are lined with maps. They've got sewer district committees and water district committees and land use committees, all these different county government activities that are going on. And she showed me the name in every single one of these little, I mean, you don't even know these things exist. Did you know that there's a committee that makes decisions about sewers and things and they are placing people in every one of these places. They're reclaiming their government. And we have to do that in the party too. All your precincts need to have a representative, and so many of your precincts are vacant because people don't even know that these jobs are there. What's happened is we've kind of gradually and steadily, frogs in the pot kind of stuff, we've steadily moved into a situation where we just assume somebody else is going to be the government. It was supposed to be us the whole time. And there are lots of things that got to get done, especially in these big counties in California. So there's tons of ways for Christians to become engaged. And it might seem little at first, but when you put all of those together, suddenly you start to have influence, and we can begin to influence in the right direction. So that's what I'm encouraging people to do.
I've had a lot of people say, oh, I don't know anything about government. I don't really want to get involved. It just seems too much to me. So you're not voting. We've been blessed with a nation where we actually get a say in who's going to be calling the shots for us. And you're not even going to be bothered to do that. Well, I don't know how to vote. Okay, here's an example of how I could recommend that you vote by biblical standards.
How about that?
Is this person pro-life? Is this person
ethical and moral?
Right.
I mean, what did John the Baptist? John the Baptist called out Herod, right? He said, "Hey, you're being immoral, right? You're sleeping with your brother's sister, right?" Okay, and it cost him his head. Okay, and maybe we Christians are a little too chicken, maybe, but. But, Jesus put his life on the line for us, and John the Baptist called out immorality. What's wrong with us? We have plenty of examples of what we need to be doing as Christians, and we're lazy. And in California, they mail you your ballot, so you have no excuse for not voting.
Right. How about judges? It's supposed to be a nonpartisan office. We get to elect these different judges.
Right.
We don't know anything about them. There's really no explanation in the voter guides about them, about who they are and how they believe. So I'll look at the names and I'll just go online. I'll do a little online search, put their name in, judge, whatever, fill in the blank. And you can get some ideas that way. But you're going to have to invest just at least a little bit of time when you get that voter guide. Actually look through it, actually go through it and make some notes on there. This votes conservative. No, definitely this one's a no. But I think that's by design. For example, Board of Supervisors, City Council, supposed to be nonpartisan.
Yes.
So we don't really know anything about how they're going to direct my city, my county, and my state unless we actually do some investigation. And that takes a little bit of time. You're right. I think laziness, apathy, is even worse. You might not be a lazy person, but you might just think, well, what can I do?
It doesn't matter how I vote. The whole thing's rigged anyway, and blah, blah, blah. And I tell people who say that they don't want to vote because the whole thing's rigged, I said, look, if you understand how it's rigged, the way it's being rigged is the machines aren't necessarily flipping votes. The machines are reporting what the tallies are. Every person who doesn't vote on this outside, that frees up a name that can be used to stuff a ballot. So what happens is if you don't vote, you're basically allowing somebody else to use your name to vote. So if you vote, you're stopping that, plus you're adding your will. So actually, all you people who think that the thing is rigged so you shouldn't vote, you should vote. Your vote counts twice. It stops your name being used, plus you get to express your opinion. So I encourage people to vote. Don't neglect that opportunity. And then you need to volunteer to be a poll watcher. You need to volunteer to be engaged. And I always tell people, don't vote early. That's what the party's telling you. That's a stupid thing, because when you vote early, you're telling the enemy how many ballots they need to stuff. And another thing that's happening is all these critical offices you just described, school boards and city officials and whatnot, those are usually take place in an early spring election, right? When the turnout is way low. And so when the turnout's way low, it's easy to cheat because the races are won by 100 ballots or a dozen ballots. It's a low turnout. So it's so easy to cheat in California now that you're mailing ballots to everybody in those dirty voter rolls of yours. It's easy just to scrape up a few of them. And so if you vote early, you're just telling them how many ballots to scrape up and stuff. So vote on election day and vote in person. By the way, the president might be announcing that very soon here, that it's going to be a single day elections. He's going to have it'd be a national holiday. Gee, we can have Juneteenth. I think we could have election day holiday. Okay.
Right.
Let's have a holiday for election day. Nobody has an excuse. Everybody can turn out to vote in person, and we can run our own polls. We can run our own elections. We can count our own ballots. There's no excuse. And you can have a signature and photo ID. If people are voting in person, it's much more secure. Stalin said, doesn't matter who casts the votes. What matters is who counts the votes. So we can also count them, because it can be us because we have the day off. So let's have fireworks. Let's have a celebration. Hey, hooray! We have freedom here. Let's celebrate our liberty together.
Amen. I think that's a great idea. He can't, again, though, dictate things to the state. He can say on national elections, this is what's going to be done, but the state can still pull all kinds of shenanigans and watch California do that. What's that?
They would have to have two separate elections then. In other words, if the president said all federal offices have to be elected and according to these federal standards, they have to comply with those. Well, but what is the state going to pay for two separate elections now? And actually, that's the way they do it in the state of Alaska. They have all their local and state elections a month before the general election. And so they actually pay for two elections, but they're the only state I'm aware of that does that.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing for the right?
I think we should have it all in one day. I think we should do it together, and where we can all keep our eyes on it and pay attention to what's going on. The whole point, and honestly, I guess I joke about it. I tell people, look, you can, if you want, you can run your elections with M&Ms. As long as everything is transparent and auditable, and and you're in charge, and your eyes are on every step of the process, you can vote however you like. I don't care. You can even use the machines as far as I'm concerned, as long as you can open it up and look at what's going on inside and make sure everything's fine. But right now, they're telling you, just trust us and we're not going to let you check anything. I mean, that's basically why they put Tina in prison. She said, wait a minute, there's a problem with this. I'm going to check this out. Oh, no, you're not going to check this out. Wait a minute. The person in charge of the election isn't even allowed to check it out? That is interesting, right? So as long as we're in charge, I don't care how you do it. And as long as we have access to every part of it. I know Mr. Liddell, I love the guy to death. He's out there against the machines, and he's not wrong. 132 countries have made the machines illegal. Okay, what's wrong with us? Why do we have them legal? And we've been duped as a country and as a culture. We need to turn that around.
Amen. I first became acquainted with you during the whole COVID shutdown. I was privileged at Epic Bible College. You spoke there. I think it was the California Republican Assembly.
Oh, my goodness. Wow, we do go way back.
I know. That's the first time I saw you, and I was still on the radio at the time. And I was stunned, because you're putting charts and graphs up there and you're going, look at this, look what happened here. Look at why did this day suddenly these numbers drop so dramatically? What was going on there? And then you not only say why and look at this and how did this happen? You actually explained how it happened. It was brilliant. And I was like, this guy's, I've seen you do that presentation at least 3 times now. Wow. What you're going to be doing this Saturday is a different take. And it's something I've been preaching for 3 years now, that Christians need to be involved. And it's vitally important now more than ever. And you will explain why it's so important and how biblically this is our responsibility and we need to take it seriously. The government is on his shoulders, as it says in the Old Testament, talking about Jesus. Yeah. And we're not going to stop God's will to be done on earth as it is in heaven. And we are going to comply with God's will. Absolutely. But that doesn't mean we disengage and we don't keep fighting for what's right. We don't keep at least trying, because I really believe all the fence sitters right now will be held accountable for what has happened to the state of California.
Jesus talks about, for
It's
example,
not too late to change that, to reverse that, and to get involved. Jesus talks about what?
Jesus talks about the least of these. You know, as you've done it to the least of these, you've done it unto me, right? And if you allow one of my little ones to stumble, it's like you better for a millstone hung around your neck and tossed in the ocean, right? Well, how about in California? You have this serious, capital S, serious issue with child trafficking, sex trafficking. Okay.
Yep.
Now, as long as you don't address that, I think you're accountable. Okay, you should be held accountable. There's a church there in Yuba City, Glad Tidings Church. They've got the Peace of Heaven thing they're setting up, and it's basically a recovery center for sex trafficked children. And Pastor Dave has told me horrible stories about the extent of child trafficking in California. It's devastating. So if you know, James 1, I think it's verse 31. It's the last verse. James writes, this is pure and undefiled religion in the sight of our Lord and Father Jesus Christ, to visit orphans and widows in their distress. So it's almost a direct command for you that this is what you're supposed to be doing. So you should be engaging this. And Jesus threatened, well, I guess it is a threat. It's more of a warning. It's like, you know, if you don't care for these least of these, then you know you're going to be held accountable. There's this story when Jesus is, I remember whether it's the Olivet Discourse or the Sermon on the Mount, when you're going to stand before me and I'm going to say, inasmuch you did to the least of these, you did to me, where he says, you know, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me drink. Okay, we have to, as Christians, we are obligated to engage these social issues. And I kind of separate political from social issues, but the social issues are downstream from the political issues. So we end up having to address both of them. I love it that you saw some of my early graphs in the COVID days. I'm a data guy. I gather data and I show people data, and they're like, whoa, I didn't even know it was that way. Like, you know, for example, in the 2024 election, everybody thinks that Trump won. He didn't. The Democrats lost. Trump actually, in most states, lost votes. Can you imagine? He went down in number of votes, but what happened is the Democrats lost more than he lost, which is, it's like the Democrats lost. So I'm going to show those kinds of data, but I can show that kind of data, for example, with abortion. I just put up a whole YouTube video describing the statistics of abortion in America. And if you're like me, I just assumed, gee, Roe v. Wade was overturned, so abortion, we should be cracking down on abortion. It's exactly the opposite. Abortion's been surging in America, and it's surging so rapidly, you can actually see the effect of it on the population right in the graphs, just with your own eyes. I don't even have to do any fancy math. I just show you the numbers of population and abortion. It's dramatic. So I like using actual data to show people what's actually going on, because they're lazy. They don't research it for themselves. They just accept what Fox News tells them, or, you know, accept what
Fox News brought to you by Pfizer, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. And they just believe what they hear. So I like showing people actual evidence and then challenging them to take action, and the appropriate action because of it.
I know you got things to do. You're out here in my home state, and I'm glad you're going to be making your way up here this coming Saturday, and I'll give all the details on that once again in just a second. Sure. But I want to ask you one more question.
Fire away, brother.
And it's about pastors. I've seen so many pastors afraid to even say anything, afraid to even get involved, afraid to even talk about anything political, even in the slightest, including abortion. Yeah. To speak out against the murder, the infanticide of all these children, and they're not talking about it. Explain, please, about the dangers and why that was by design with President Lyndon Johnson and the whole changing the tax structure for religious nonprofits to a 501c3. Yeah. What was the significance of that? Because it didn't used to be that way.
I hear that a lot. I'll say to a pastor, gee, you got to engage this social issue. You know, there's pornography in your local schools. There's all that, you know, and they're like, no. We can't do that. That's a political issue. We have to be concerned about our 501c3 status. And so I like asking pastors this question. I say, so how many churches have lost their 501c3 status, sir? Guess what? 0. Okay. And so it's like a threat that's being held over their head. And it's easy for them to not take a stand because they can reference the threat, even though it's an empty threat. Because I think what they're more worried about is the division in their own bodies, their own congregations. If there are going to be people in their own congregations who have a different political point of view, and I love the name of your show, don't talk about it, right? Or we don't talk, because you're not supposed, in polite conversation, you're not supposed to raise these issues. And I think they're more concerned about maintaining unity in the body, they'll say, or afraid of their 501c3, and oh my goodness, we don't want to piss off any of the people in our congregation because then the collections go down, or our membership
There it is.
goes down.
There it is.
And Pastor Dave Bryan, he talks about the great American religious enterprise. Okay, it's more about maintaining that level. What I see, and I think it's a hard thing to say, but I just tell people, if you're in a church where they won't make a stand, change churches, because that isn't the way Jesus was. Jesus took a stand. He took a stand all the way to the cross. Okay, and Peter and Paul and Barnabas and on the missionary journeys and whatnot, they took a stand. They took a stand that got them martyred. Okay, so as Christians, we are supposed to make a stand for righteousness. And so I really think that's what's going on in these churches. And fortunately, as I travel the country, I've been in 48 states now and spoken to 100,000 people plus easily in person. And fortunately, I see something happening. I see people waking up. You mentioned COVID. COVID was a big deal, and it's directly related to your question about pastors. The churches that shut down suffered because of it. All these other churches sprung up in my own hometown in Cincinnati, and near Cincinnati. Churches that stayed open during that time exploded in membership, okay? Because people are saying, well, we don't want to go to church where they kowtow to the government. Since when does the government get to tell us, the churches, to shut down? And so I was engaged in Colorado with a lady there named Sharona Bishop during COVID, and she approached me. She says, "You're a scientist. Can you please read this deposition, these court orders put out by the state to shut our churches down?" And so I read them, and I'm like, these aren't scientific. These are horrible. And I wrote opposition papers, and we kept the churches open in Colorado because of my stand against them. So you can win these. And in Southern California, your own state, right? The churches in Southern California made a stand, and they won their lawsuits, and the state had to pay them damages. So what's your excuse as a church for not making a stand for righteousness? We are the light. We're supposed to be the salt of the earth. We're supposed to be the light on the hill. If we hold up Christ, if we emulate his life, then we'll draw all men unto him.
I think a lot of that is fear. Like you said, fear, but also they're complacent. We got a lot of we got to keep butts in the seats, and we got to keep the donations up, and we don't want to say anything that's going to cause anybody to be upset with me. So I'm not going to take a stand for the Lord, because a lot of pastors, I have now, studies have come out that they don't even maybe necessarily believe that Jesus is the inherent Son of God. They don't really necessarily believe that Jesus is the only way and the truth and the life. Yeah. No one comes to the Father except through him. They don't really necessarily believe that anymore. Pastors.
Then they don't belong in the pulpit. My last church that I was I was a music minister for many years, and in the last church I was a music minister, I kept a tally for 13 weeks in a row where our pastor never said the words Jesus Christ from the pulpit. Okay. How can you not say that? Okay. And so I created an alias on social media, and I was reporting on my church to all the church members, and I created a stink and got her fired. Okay. And she actually resigned, but it's the same thing. And we as Christians cannot tolerate that. No. We have to and if you don't believe the Bible, then you shouldn't be in the pulpit. Okay.
Exactly.
It's that simple.
Exactly. And those are the people calling the shots for so many of these big mega churches.
Yeah.
This coming Saturday, it starts at 6:30. It's free. It's a free event. If you've never seen or heard Dr. Frank speaking, he's very engaging. I guarantee you it's going to be eye-opening, but he's also funny, and he's a great public speaker. Don't miss this opportunity to hear him with especially this topic about getting God's people engaged in the government that the Lord blessed us with. By divine intervention, this was a nation that was created, a constitutional republic like nothing ever seen in the history of the world. And we're going to just sit back and let it be taken over by demonic people.
I'm not sitting back, brother.
I know you're not. I'm not saying that lightly. This is a demonic oppression that's happening in my state of California.
We battle
And
not
God's-
against powers. We're against, it's a spiritual war. Ephesians.
Yeah, exactly right. And we need to be praying against evil, and we need to be showing up and engaging and getting educated. And this is your opportunity this coming Saturday. It's called The Point Church. Pastor Ed Black, I know personally. He does not shrink back. He's a tremendous blessing, and that's Point with an E on the end. The Point Church, and it's at 8155 Watt Avenue in Antelope. 8155 Watt Avenue in Antelope, the Point Church, this coming Saturday. It's March 22nd, and it starts at 6:30. It's great getting you on the show again. I'm looking forward to seeing you again this Saturday and hearing this new presentation that you have going on. This is really exciting. Like I said, it is free. I'm knowing Dr. Frank and the Point Church is definitely a family-friendly environment. Bring the children. Let them start learning these things too.
If you bring the kids, I'll spend a little time with them too.
Oh, that's very good. Oh, yeah, you do that. You'll call them down, and oh, yeah. The point I want to make though is he doesn't charge for these things. They're going to take what they call a love offering at the end of his presentation, and I hope you'll give, because he's doing this out of his own pocket. He doesn't get paid for any of this. He refuses to accept money when he does these public speaking engagements. You're an honorable gentleman and an extraordinary doctor, and I appreciate your time so much, Dr. Douglas Frank. Thank you, and I'll see you this Saturday.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir, absolutely. It was my honor and privilege. May God bless you and keep you. May God bless America. But most importantly, America, bless God.